They'll be working on fiscal 2012 spending, and at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, they'll hold a procedural vote on the continuing resolution to fund federal agencies and programs. You're watching live coverage here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Sovereign God, our lips sing your praises, and our souls rejoice in you. We pause now in prayer to enter your throne room and seek your face. Thank you for the opportunity you give our lawmakers to protect our freedoms and to share with others the hope that is ours as a free people. Use them to increase joy and peace in our world and to bring hope to the hearts of the dispossessed. As they move from crisis to crisis, help our senators to see more clearly the spiritual values that are the heritage and guide for this land we love. Let their thoughts, words, and actions be acceptable to you today and always, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., September 26, 2011. To the Senate, under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Christopher A. Coons, a senator from the state of Delaware, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Following leader remarks, the Senate will be in a pre-morning business till 4:30 p.m. today. At that time, the Senate will resume consideration of the motion to concur in the House message to accompany H.R. 2608. Filing deadline for second-degree amendments to the House message is 5 p.m. today. At 5:30, there will be a cloture vote on the motion to concur in the House message with the Reed of Nevada amendment. Mr. President, 2 weeks ago, the Senate passed a bipartisan bill to fund the Federal Emergency Management Agency, known as FEMA. And for 2 weeks, House Republicans have been sitting on that bill, taking no action. The House of Representatives have refused to act on a bipartisan bill that funds FEMA for the next year. And not only have they not moved that bill in any way, but they left town. The House of Representatives, as we speak, on the eve of the government shutting down next Saturday, just a few days from now, and FEMA on the verge of having no money, they left. They're gone. They're not in Washington. Real hard to negotiate with people who aren't here. It's hard to do legislation when one part of our bicameral legislature is not here. But Democrats are not giving up on funding FEMA and keeping our government open. We're here. The Senate is in session. A House Republican bill that would have killed 45,000 American jobs did not have the votes last week to pass the Senate. Wasn't even close. 36 votes. But that doesn't mean we have to shut down the government or abandon Americans in need. Democrats have made a good faith effort to compromise. Today, the Senate will consider compromise legislation to fund FEMA and keep the government open without killing jobs. Our compromise includes a clean, continuing resolution, a bill to fund the government for the next few weeks. Republicans in both chambers have already agreed to and voted for the funding levels in this continuing resolution. So this shouldn't be a controversial vote for them. They've already voted for it. The legislation also includes $3.65 billion in funding for FEMA, which will give American communities ravaged by floods, wildfires, tornadoes, and other disasters the help they need. We know House Republicans support that funding level as well, since they voted for it last week. Democrats would have given FEMA more, as we did with our vote last week. It's interesting, President Obama has declared disasters in 48 of the 50 states this year. Unfortunately, though, this bill will force us to revisit this issue in a few weeks when FEMA funds will be depleted again. But this compromise legislation will cure FEMA's immediate needs. I urge my colleagues to do the right thing and support this good faith compromise to help disaster victims now. In effect, what we've done, Mr. President, we're waiting for the House to take action on the bill that funds everything for a year, which they should do. But in the meantime, we have the opportunity here to vote today on legislation that takes the level that has already passed the House. I don't know how more we could compromise now, much more fair we could be. So I urge my colleagues to do the right thing and support this good faith compromise to help disaster victims and help them now. Folks on the ground in states that have been hard hit by disasters, people who have seen the devastation firsthand, are all saying the same thing. There's no more time to waste. The U.S. Conference of Mayors has begged us to act. A bipartisan group of governors has pleaded with us to act. And tens of thousands of Americans in every state in the Union are demanding that we act. Republicans must not continue to block FEMA. Block them from getting the resources it needs to help disaster victims. This compromise legislation should satisfy House Republicans. It includes their own much lower FEMA funding number. And it satisfies Democrats because it does not include a $1.5 billion cut that would kill jobs. The United States Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, has warned us that this cut would kill 45,000 jobs at a time when our economy and our country can least afford it. Mr. President, here's what the Chamber of Commerce has said. Now, the Chamber of Commerce, they're not a lapdog for Democrats. I appreciate the work they do, but certainly, Mr. President, we need to listen to what they're saying, and my Republican colleagues need to listen to what they're saying. This is a direct quote. This loan program promotes manufacturing in the United States and is an important component of America's energy security. Promotes manufacturing. Here's what the National Association of Manufacturers also, Mr. President, certainly not anyone that's out there promoting Democrats all the time. They try to be fair. The National Association of Manufacturers, quote, defunding this program will hurt manufacturers and their employees. How much more direct could it be? Putting this offset in here is absolutely wrong. Democrats believe, and American auto producers agree, that we shouldn't have to choose between saying no to disaster victims and killing American jobs. So, as you can see, this legislation is fair to both sides. It will get disaster victims the help they need without killing jobs. It's a common sense solution that should pass both chambers with bipartisan support. We'll vote on it shortly. So, Mr. President, I'm cautiously optimistic that my Republican colleagues here in the Senate will not force a government shutdown. By not voting for our bill, that's what it is. Earlier this month, when the Senate passed bipartisan legislation funding FEMA that I talked about earlier, 10 Republicans joined Democrats in voting for the bill. It would have given FEMA nearly twice the funding that this compromise legislation gives FEMA. At a time when those 10 Republicans said they believed disaster relief should be immune to partisan politics, they believe that their constituents shouldn't wait a moment longer for help. I can only assume those Republicans are as angry as I am over the delays by the Republican colleagues in the House. In the week since that vote, and it hasn't been long, very short period of time, a matter of days. The disasters have not gone away in the home states of Missouri, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Maine, Nevada, North Dakota, Alaska, Florida, Pennsylvania. These are the states where Republican senators voted for this bill, rightfully so. Roads and bridges, homes, schools in those states, and many others must still be repaired and replaced. Yet, millions of dollars, in fact, this restoration work, most of it has been stopped in those 10 states. Nationwide, work on nearly $500 million worth of reconstruction has been delayed because FEMA is out of money. But even with construction projects at risk in communities that were only just beginning to get back on their feet, FEMA's disaster fund will still run out of money this week. As to what date, that's debatable. FEMA has devoted every penny in its coffers to pay for food and shelter for families who lost their homes in major disasters in the last few months. There isn't a dime left for anything else, and even now, that money's going to run dry if we don't do something quickly. That's why I'm hopeful Republicans will do the right thing today. We must remember that we're not talking about zeros on a budget spreadsheet. FEMA takes care of people who have lost their moms and dads, sons and daughters, spouses and friends and others. Without additional funding, thousands of people who have lost literally everything they owned will be forced to go without food and shelter. The reconstruction will be delayed in communities where homes and schools, roads have been wiped off the map by tragedies so terrible they're difficult to comprehend. Mr. President, I brought a chart here just to show some of the devastation. The upper left-hand corner is a picture of part of Joplin, Missouri. There is some of it that is just wiped out now. That you see a few structures, there are a few cars left in the rubble there. Fire still burning. This happened this picture was taken just hours after that storm hit. I have talked on the floor here about the windstorm. I said winds of almost 300 miles an hour. I said winds of 300 miles an hour, not almost. And one of my senator friends came to me and said, that couldn't be true. I just don't think that's true. So I knew I was right because I went to, in the last week or 10 days, a briefing that the National Science Foundation put forward about some of the new things they've invented and are now developing. And one of those is how to gauge how hard the wind blows. And it's interesting to note that we have a number of recorded storms blowing more than 300 miles an hour. This one, they don't have the exact number down, but probably that, because it's one of the worst storms ever to hit our country. Here is a picture, Mr. President, on the Nags Head, North Carolina. This Hurricane Irene. It not only washed homes out to sea, it washed out other facilities out to sea, devastated homes underwater. You can see the picture of the two people sitting on those steps. That was probably one of the seaside homes. Could have been some structure right on the coast, but it's gone. Homes have been washed into the sea, not only in South Carolina, but other places. You see here in the lower right-hand corner just a small picture of the fires in Texas. The fires in Texas burned more than 2,000 homes. They've had thousands of fires in Texas. Devastation is, look at it. You can see in the background there homes burning. It's hard to comprehend the destruction that took place there. Cairo, Illinois. It's a unique place because it's spelled like Cairo, but they pronounce it Cairo. That's it. That's a picture of Cairo, Illinois. A good-sized city. The Mississippi River has overflowed its banks and swept away everything in its path. This, Mr. President, is more important than politics. Tornado, hurricane, drought, floods That's just some of the devastation that's affected our citizens. And here we are, having passed a bill, sent it to the House. They've done nothing with it. We had overwhelming bipartisan support here, and they're gone. They had that 2 weeks ago, they're gone. What we're doing here should be more important than partisan posturing. Every member of the Republican Party, and frankly, every member of the Democratic Party. I know it is to me. President Truman once said, quote, "America was built on courage, on imagination, and unbeatable determination to do the job at hand," end quote. If there were ever a time when we have the obligation to do the job at hand, it's here. And to think that work in Joplin, Missouri has basically come to a standstill. Work in Nags Head, North Carolina, work has come to a standstill. Cairo, Illinois, and of course all through Texas. Only a few of the projects dealing with Irene and Tropical Storm Lee are being worked on now. So no one can understand, I don't think, the devastation unless you've been there. I know I can't. No amount of money can ever replace what the people of Joplin or Cairo have lost. When I say be there, I'm trying to be as empathetic as I can be, but I've never been involved in a flood like that, anywhere near that. Certainly not the fires that we've seen here, not a tornado, not a tropical storm. So, Mr. President, no amount of money can ever replace what the people of these devastated areas have lost. But at least we can help them get back on their feet. We can help them start over. That's what FEMA does. That's FEMA's job. So it's up to us, Congress, to give FEMA the resources it needs to do their job.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. And under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business until 4:30 p.m., with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Mr. President.
The senator from Louisiana.
Mr. President, I'd like to speak for up to 15 minutes and may extend my time as the debate goes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to follow up on the remarks of Leader Reid by reminding everyone how this unfortunate but in some ways necessary situation is that we're in. This whole debate, which in my view is worth having, it's unfortunate that it's so close to the end of the year because the Senate actually offered a bill, as you may remember, earlier in September to try to avoid getting to this last minute. But this whole controversy started when Republican leader Cantor, just a few days after Hurricane Irene had raked the East Coast and wreaked havoc from North Carolina through Connecticut into Vermont and New Hampshire, which people are still reeling over. A few days after that, the way this controversy started was when Representative Cantor said, before we can provide help, we need to find an offset in the budget. In other words, before we can help the victims of Irene, the thousands of homes that were flooded, the electrical wires on the ground, the businesses flooded out, we have to go to Washington and find a program to cut. I strongly objected then. I've objected every day since then to that Cantor doctrine. And this is an argument and a debate worth having. This could have been completely avoided if the day after, with all the outcry from Representative Cantor's own district and newspapers around the country, many of whom have editorialized against that position, would have just said, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake." I've had to say that in my political career. I'm sorry I made a mistake. But instead of saying that, he doubled down. And he doubled down on the backs of people from Pennsylvania to New York and actually to Louisiana and Mississippi, because it's our projects that have been stopped for the last 6 weeks. FEMA, as far as Louisiana is concerned, was out of money 6 weeks ago. This is what the Cantor doctrine looks like to a very clever cartoonist, and I'm going to put this up in my office and keep it forever. He says, "Welcome to the Republican Disaster Relief Hotline. At the tone, please tell us the emergency and how you plan to offset the cost of your rescue." And here's grandmother sitting on the house with her little cat on the chimney with her television and her cane calling FEMA. Now, I'm the appropriation chair of this committee, as you all know. It's a good thing I'm chairing this appropriations committee because I happen to know a lot about disaster relief, having to lead the effort for the Gulf Coast in the wake of Katrina, Rita, Gustav, and Ike. This is not a little matter. As some of the press has reported over the weekend, I've read most of the editorials from coast to coast. Some of them have written, "Why is Congress arguing this is such a minor matter?" I don't think the $40 billion that it took to rebuild the Gulf Coast is a minor matter, and I don't think any taxpayer in America would think $40 billion is a minor matter. Now, this Cantor doctrine must be rejected. I'm not the only one that believes this. There are wonderful articles and editorials in papers all across the country. I'm going to read some of them today, and I'm so glad that people were working through the weekend and focusing on this debate. From Colorado, the Denver Post writes, "And some members of Congress are so bent on budget cutting," they're referring to the Republicans, of course, "that they happily seize the opportunity to demand concessions despite the larger impact on our struggling economy. In this case, it's demanding that money for Federal Emergency Management Agency to provide emergency disaster assistance to communities hit by flood, fire, and other manner of natural disasters be offset by comparable cuts to the federal budget. Demanding such offsets is unprecedented in terms of emergency relief, and it has again manufactured the prospects of a shutdown. To be clear, we're not supporting a blank check, and Mr. President, neither am I. I've been an appropriator since I was 23 years old. I'm 56. I understand about balanced budgets and debt limits and curbing government spending. I've been a part of those efforts. The last time we had a balanced budget, a Democrat was in the White House, Bill Clinton, as you know. We understand that there's no such thing as a free lunch or a blank check. And we're going to pay for these disasters, but we don't have to pay for them while grandmother is on the roof. We can figure out how to pay for it later and send help to her now. The article goes on to say, but we think any near-term spending cuts are best dealt with by the super committee as opposed to a symbolic standoff that sends ripple effects beyond Washington. In Vermont, they say, though individuals eligible, this is the Brattleboro, Vermont reformer, though individuals eligible for federal disaster aid and state and city governments recouping emergency response costs are still receiving funds, projects dating back as far as Hurricane Katrina are once again waiting for money. How did House Majority Eric Leader Cantor, Virginia, respond? He said, quote, and I'm quoting the newspaper, he said, "Change like this is hard," he said. The paper goes on to say, however, "Not as hard as waiting for power lines to get restrung along the Auger Hole Road, wondering when, if ever, you'll be able to move back into your waterlogged home or when your road might become passable again." Though Congress has about a week to get everything ironed out, we can expect this argument to go down to the last minute. I wish we weren't here at the last minute. I want to remind everyone the Senate passed with a bipartisan response to this, which provided the money that FEMA needed without the offset, was passed by a bipartisan 10 Republicans and all the Democrats and sent to the House. They could have passed that bill, and we would all be gone now with FEMA replenished, set up for the next year, and the jobs program, which is really a private sector effort to create jobs in America, would be untouched and would be moving forward. But this whole argument started when Representative Cantor came up with a new Tea Party agenda, which is for flood victims to let FEMA know what offset can be required before they're rescued. Other newspapers throughout the country, Pennsylvania, it says, much of northeast Pennsylvania needs federal assistance to recover from flooding, but two of the region's representatives, in this case both Republican representatives, offered an unacceptable condition. They go on to say, they list the members, they say the problem isn't the Senate, which earlier had passed a bill by a positive vote that included 10 Republicans to appropriate more than $7 billion for FEMA that handles disaster relief. That fund could run dry. The House responded with a bill that would provide $3.7, but only if 2 loan programs for energy development projects were rescinded. Senator Harry Reid, they say, goes on to offer a compromise with the House. But I guess we're in the time of no compromise and take whatever hostages you can. In this case, the Tea Party and the Republicans want to take Grandma hostage, who's on her roof, asking for help. Even the New York newspapers. Congress shouldn't allow disaster aid for people devastated by Tropical Storm Irene to be stalled over a fight about how much is enough and how to cover the tab. Now, we're willing to negotiate with the House over how much. This is an argument that, we believe that our number of $6.1 billion is not enough for the year, and I think the records will show as we move forward that I am accurate. But given the situation that we're in, we don't need to fight over that amount, because if 6.1 isn't enough, most certainly 3.5 billion that the House has offered isn't enough, and we can work that out later on. And that's what Leader Reid has offered. But requiring an offset, particularly an offset from a program that Republicans themselves supported, that was signed into law by President Bush, that is supported by the Chamber of Commerce, the National Manufacturers Association, the League of Cities, the National Conference of Mayors, an offset that's created 40,000 jobs. That is a road, Mr. President, I don't think we should go down. If it's a manufacturing program today that the new Cantor Doctrine requires, as one of the great articles this weekend said, maybe next time we have a disaster, we have to offer up education programs. And the next time we have a disaster, we have to offer up a fourth of our transportation budget. And the next time we have a disaster, we have to offer up aid to Israel. Or maybe the next time we have a disaster, we have to offer up something up. When do the offerings stop? And the worst time to negotiate how to find funding after disaster is when emotions are high, when people are really at their sort of emotional limit, particularly the disaster victims themselves. You want to argue and debate these things when cool heads prevail. And also, once you get your estimates in, it's hard within the week or two or three of an emergency to even know what those estimates are. You've got to send time for the insurance adjusters, FEMA adjusters to go out, for people to even get back to their communities to assess the damage. These things, believe me, I've been through this. There were months after the aftermath of Katrina before people in my city of New Orleans and in parts of my state could even get back into their neighborhoods. Months, not days, not weeks, months. I remember people along the Gulf Coast having to come in on foot with chainsaws to try to get back. It took them days. So that's another reason why you don't want to have to find an offset to fund disasters. You want to do a couple of things. You want to budget as carefully as you can in advance. And I want to answer this argument that, oh, well, the reason Congress is in this pickle is because they didn't budget for disasters. I'm going to put up a chart, and the staff will grab that one for me in a minute, to show that we have budgeted for disasters. We have not budgeted as adequately as we should. This has been a problem for Democratic presidents and Republican presidents. But I have to say, as chair of this committee, I've doubled the amount of money, more than doubled the amount of money in anticipation of disasters to try to get in front of it. But no one, unless you had a crystal ball, could have predicted that 48 out of 50 states would have had disasters this year in America. Mr. President, it's unprecedented. You would have had to have a crystal ball that was always right and never, ever wrong to be able to predict that we would have had that many disasters. So what can we do in the future? And I've offered to my colleagues, Senator Blunt, Senator Snowe, and others, I'll work with you in the future to get a bill that mandates that Democrats and Republican presidents, regardless of party, would have to send to us, budgeted and paid for, at least a 10-year average of previous disasters. But I have to say, even if we would have had that law in place, which is the best that we can all collectively think of and would be recommended by universities or businesses would do the same, we still would have underestimated this last year. And we still would have underestimated Katrina and Rita. And that's why I'm on the floor making this argument. I know it's inconvenient for members to have to come back this week. I know people wanted to be away this week to work in their districts. But this is an argument and a debate worth having. I hope that our side will prevail. But if not, at least we put up the fight that I think is necessary to make the argument to the American people. But even if we had had a crystal ball, and even if we had had budgeted more than the $1.8 billion that we budget every year approximately out of the Homeland Security, look what happened, Mr. President, when Katrina and Rita and Wilma had hit. This went up to $45 billion. Katrina, Rita, and Wilma. Wilma, you will remember, was one of the storms that hit Florida. In the year before, Florida had 4 storms. Dennis, Ivan, Francis, and Charlie hit Florida in 1 year. So I believe that's why Senator Rubio and Senator Nelson understand the hollowness and the danger of the Cantor Doctrine. Because had this doctrine been in effect when these 4 hurricanes hit Florida back in 2004, the people of Florida would have had to come to Congress, and before we could spend one dime to help them, we would have had to find a $3 billion offset. So maybe, Mr. President, we would have gone to your state and taken the money out of your transportation program, or gone to my state, or gone somewhere to find $3 billion, but we didn't. We sent Florida their $3 billion, and we will pay for it over time. And I don't know what we would have done in the Gulf Coast had the people of the United States enforced the Cantor Doctrine, which was defined $45 billion like that, before we could have sent money to Mississippi Alabama, or Louisiana, or Texas. And I could go on and on and on. And one of the more disappointing positions that Republicans are holding, particularly Representative Cantor, which is very disappointing, is that we have to scramble to find offsets for Americans that are in trouble, but we can just send free money to Iraq and Afghanistan. We don't have to send an offset to rebuild Iraq. We don't have to find an offset to rebuild Afghanistan. But we have to scramble around here and find an offset to help the people of our country. Third point. Some of the House members have stood up and said, Senator Landrieu is wrong. We have offset emergency funding in the past. That is correct. We have offset emergency funding. But emergency funding is different than FEMA funding. You have emergencies like dams break and levees break and the Corps of Engineers needs extra money. And so over the course of time, we have occasionally, because we want to be responsible with the budget when we can, and when we have time to figure it out, we most certainly can find offsets and programs that aren't working as well, and so we can eliminate that and push some of that money to emergency funding. We've done it in the military. We've done it for the Corps of Engineers. But, Mr. President, if we do this, this will be the first time we have required an offset for FEMA funding in the history of our country. I think it is a road we do not want to go down. And it can be avoided. We don't have to walk down this road. We can eliminate the offset completely. FEMA may, under the last 24, 48 hours, may be able to stretch their money through Friday. And we can even accept the House number, which is a lower number. It is not going to be adequate. We're going to be back here literally in 8 weeks having the same debate, but they are hard-headed and insistent that they want to continue to have this debate week after week after week. But at least the $3 billion will jumpstart all of our programs that are stalled, about $500 million, and many of them are in my state, which is why I'm spending a lot of time on this, but I'm also concerned about everybody else's state, and will give us enough money to get through Thanksgiving, maybe the first of the year. It is not going to be enough for all of next year, and that is a reasonable compromise. And on the side of that compromise is the Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, 4 governors of disaster-hit states, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, the National League of Cities, and the National Conference of Mayors. That's just to name a few. There are editorials across the country, from Pennsylvania to New York, Louisiana, the Times-Picayune, my own newspaper, I'm very proud, editorialized for this position, that to require an offset before you can be rescued is not the American way. We don't require it when we declare war or disaster. We go ahead and we fund, we don't fund the effort, we send the troops and we fund them later. I don't believe we want to go down this road. So Leader Reid has brought us back here to try to work through this. Again, the Senate in September passed a bipartisan resolution to this. The House rejected it for their own reason, insisting that we have an offset. We're back saying that is a wrong policy to adopt. This is not the right time in America to adopt it. And if you were going to adopt it, this is definitely the wrong program to eliminate. This program has created with the private sector. This isn't a government jobs. These are private sector jobs that have been created. And Republican leaders in the House, and I'm going to read these letters for the record this afternoon again, supported the program, wrote letters to the Secretary asking for this funding to be spent in their districts. And then they turn around and offer this up as an offset when it is unnecessary, unprecedented, and absolutely wrong-headed. And for the legislators, congressmen and women along the Gulf Coast, it's particularly disturbing. After receiving $45 billion, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas, after Katrina and Rita, not one penny offset while it was going on. We're all going to be paying for it for many years to come in our regular budgeting process. To then turn around and say when the East Coast needs help, oh no, we have to find an offset today. And that's how this argument started. You know, I don't like to fight. I like to cooperate. I'm one of 9 siblings. I have 2 children myself. I've been happily married to my husband for 23 years. We resolve things in talking and negotiating in our home. We don't like to fight in our family. But I've learned one thing, Mr. President, some things are worth fighting for. And whether I lose, I've led this effort, I've been proud to lead it. I am so grateful to the colleagues on the Democratic side, both in the House and the Senate, that have spoken on this point, that have changed their schedules to support this. Win or lose, this is the right thing to stand up against the Cantor Doctrine and the Tea Party agenda. I guess this is where this comes from. We've never seen this before. Never have we offset a dime of FEMA funding. We've offset emergency funding. We've offset defense emergency, Corps of Engineer emergency, HUD, Community Development Block Grant money we've offset, but not FEMA. But the Republican caucus in that House has just run us right down to the wire, not willing to negotiate, not willing to even recognize the bipartisan bill that we sent over there. And sometimes we say bipartisan around here, Mr. President, if you have one Republican on and all the Democrats, and we kind of brag because we have bipartisan. This was 10 Republican senators. That's a big number today. And we broke a Republican filibuster on this with 10 Republican senators that said Eric Cantor was wrong. Now is not the time. We don't have to find an offset for this. Let's negotiate. Let's work through this. And they were right. I hope they'll stand strong. I hope the leadership can work this out. But again, if we can't, it was worth, in my view, the fight over this to say this is a Cantor Doctrine is dangerous for the country. And let me just remind everyone, because I've spoken about the Gulf Coast, this is 48 states represented here that have been hit by disasters. The only state that has been spared a natural disaster is Michigan and West Virginia. But as the senators from Michigan will tell you, they've been experiencing their own economic disaster now for almost 6 years, an economic meltdown in Michigan because of the crash of the auto industry and the foreclosure disaster and the crash of some of the Wall Street banks and other banks. Michigan has been very hard hit. And West Virginia is always one of our poorer states with great assets, but they struggle all the time. So you could honestly say that all 50 states is in need of help. Why don't we just help them? We have a super committee set up. Many of us are working hard on closing this deficit gap. We've already cut trillions, literally trillions of dollars out of this budget. Over the last 2 years, we have trillions more to cut, and we have revenues to raise. But every time we have to find money in this budget, in this case, for something that is wholly unprecedented and unnecessary, they recommend a program that is actually helping to turn around a very weak job outlook. It's creating jobs. It's created 40,000. It could create more. Public-private partnership, promoting loans to auto companies that are creating new and different kinds of automobiles so that we can minimize our dependence on foreign oil. We can start building again in America. We can start manufacturing again in America. And again, a program, you know, some of the newspapers reported it's a program that Democrats support. Mr. President, this is a program George Bush signed into law. This is a program that Republicans and Democrats have supported. This is a program that actually works to put Americans back to work. Why would you pick this one? Why would you pick anyone, but why would you pick this one? Because you wanted to pick a fight, and you knew we weren't just going to say, okay, fine. So we didn't pick this fight. I didn't pick this fight. Representative Cantor started it when he decided on a Cantor doctrine that would make disaster victims have to find an offset before they could be helped. And I'm going to close with where I started, with this cartoon that says it all. Welcome to the Republican Disaster Relief Hotline. At the tone, please tell us the emergency and how you plan to offset the cost of your rescue. This is not America. We've gone too far. If this kind of government is on the Tea Party agenda, I suggest they remove that item for consideration. This is not the way we operate our government in the United States. We are there for people in their time of need. We do not ask them to find an offset. We will pay for this. We are working to have our budget balanced, but we do not put this kind of pressure on tax-paying Americans who hardly ask us for anything really. But when their home is washed away, when their business is destroyed, they expect FEMA to be there. And they don't have to scramble around with their congressional delegation or their mayors or their council members or their local representatives to wring their hands and say, what program can we suggest that Congress cut so we can get our, our meals today or our shelter for next week? It's just not the way we do business. So I hope that as members come back tonight to talk about this, we can find a way forward, keep our government operating, and do the right thing for Americans in our country today. And I yield the floor.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Thank you.